Hey there. Did you just finally get rid of all the binkies? I mean, like, no more pacifiers in the house at all. Hooray! And the child's finally off the bottle, but oh my gosh, here's the next hurdle to cross. Your child sucks his thumb. You may be thinking to yourself, is this even a problem? I mean, it really helps him to go to sleep and take a nap. And then, what does this have to do with speech therapy? And I'm just so confused. Well, if you were able to join us last week, we talked about how sucking on a pacifier and using a bottle can hinder a child's speech development if the child is over the age of about 1. So today we're going to talk about something similar when it comes to thumb sucking. And if we have not met yet, my name is Jessica Balog, and I am the CEO and founder of Fluent Children's Therapy, a pediatric speech therapy clinic here in Tacoma, Washington. And I'm excited to join you today and every week for a conversation about communication where we just chat about just various topics, a lot of questions that we hear, as being a speech language pathologist, I get a lot of questions from parents about a variety of things related to speech and language and communication. So I'm excited to share that with you today. Back to thumb sucking. Well, what you may not know is similar to using a pacifier, thumb sucking can be a very addictive habit for children because it is so often closely related to self-soothing. The biggest difference is that when it comes to a pacifier or a nipple on a bottle, you can at least get rid of those. There's something physical and external. You can throw them away, you can hide them, you can do lots of different things. When it comes to your child's thumb, you can't really just get rid of it so easily. So there are a couple of different strategies that we'll talk about today on how you can start to eliminate that habit. And again, we're looking at kids really ages 1 and above to where it really starts to become a problem. And when it becomes a problem, we're really looking at how does it affect your child's speech development. And some review from last week, when it comes to a child using their thumb, sucking their thumb, or using a pacifier in a similar way, if it's constantly in their mouth, one, they're going to have a harder time exploring and using new sounds and different just vocal play because there's constantly something in there blocking their tongue and their lips and their teeth from really getting all those speech sounds that we love to hear as babies are getting older and developing more. The other thing is it can start to develop a high palate, so this top part of your mouth is called the palate. And when your child's thumb is in there all day long, especially with that sucking pattern, it can start to develop their jaw and their teeth around that. So it can become what we call an open jaw. So their teeth start to have like a real overbite, which can hinder speech sounds from being pronounced in the correct way. And then it can also make them have a high palate. So it's harder for them to get their tongue up for certain sounds like the L sound or the R sound because their palate is so high. They've got to do extra work to get their tongue in the right place to make those sounds. So that's how thumb sucking and speech are related. Now let's talk about why it could be a problem. Well, what really separates children who can quit sucking their thumb easily and some who may need a more structured plan, it really comes down to 3 things. The frequency, so how often are they doing it? Is it all day? Is it just at nap times, just at meal times? So you really want to take a look at how often is your child sucking his or her thumb. And then you want to look at the duration. How long is that happening? Is it just a quick couple of seconds and then it's out? Or do they keep it in their mouth for a longer time? And then the intensity. So you can tell some kids really have a strong suck pattern when it comes to sucking their thumb, and some just don't have as much. Or is it harder if you tell them, okay, stop sucking your thumb? Do they have a harder time quitting it immediately, or does it take them longer to stop doing that? So those are the 3 things when you're thinking about, my child, he sucks his thumb, but it's really not that big of a deal. Take a look at the frequency, how often it's happening, the duration, how long are they sucking their thumb, and the intensity. Are they able to stop it quite quickly when you tell them to, or does it take them a long time to quit that habit? Those are going to be the three things that really separate kids who can just kind of maybe grow out of it, get over it quickly on their own, or those who may continue to have this as a bad habit as they get older. And I've seen in my many years of practice, kids as old as 6 and 7 that are still sucking their thumb, and they typically come to see us because now they're really having a hard time pronouncing certain sounds, again because they've got that high palate and they've got maybe an overbite, or their jaw isn't as developed as it should be. So that's kind of what we want to look at. Now, just to give you some hope, quitting can be hard for your child, but it is possible. There are some structured and strategic ways that you can go about it in terms of making a plan, and we'll chat about all of that today. But you may be thinking, okay, but how is this really a problem? If they're only doing it to help them get to sleep, what's the big deal about that? So besides just the speech part of it, it can affect your child's teeth and palate, like we talked about, similar to how a pacifier and a bottle affect that. But there's also the social part of it. So unlike a pacifier in a bottle, when it comes to thumb sucking, especially if your child is doing it outside of the home, or if it's inside of the home and you've got people over and they see them sucking their thumb, we're talking about kids who are 2, 3 and above, it can be socially unacceptable, which is hard for kids. It can be looked down upon, not just for the child. Other people might think, a child sucking their thumb really appears to be different. Either they're shy or insecure, or maybe they're not as intelligent or poorly behaved. Now, your child could be none of these things, but that's the perception that people have when they see a child that's a little bit older, and we're talking even toddler preschool age, that is still sucking their thumb. That's the perception that people will have. So from a social standpoint, we really want to protect our children from that as well. And then parents and other people can really look down upon you as the parent. They may think, well, you have no control over your child, you don't really care what they're doing, maybe you're not tending to their needs, or maybe you are unwilling to tackle a difficult problem. And again, these could be true or not true, but that's the perception that comes with having a child who sucks their thumb, especially the older they get. And of course, people can think whatever they want, right? And that doesn't matter. But they will talk to their kids about it, and then their kids will be in school with your kids, and it just perpetuates this problem. And if it's not something that you want to continue long term, which really, who does, we really want to nip it in the bud as soon as we can once you start identifying that, wow, this is going to be a bigger problem and my child's not going to just stop or be able to get over it on their own. So the first step is to create a plan to quit. And most of the information I'll be talking about today is from this wonderful resource that I love by Pam Marshala, that is called How to Stop Thumb Sucking. Pretty straightforward. It's a small book. It's really thin, but it's got some great practical ideas that you can put into place. You don't need a professional to be able to implement these strategies. You don't need to see a speech therapist, if your child's still young. If they're starting to have difficulty with certain sounds, that's typically where we come in. But these are all things and strategies that you can use on your own to help your child stop their thumb sucking. So I'll put a link in the comments below so that you can check out that resource for yourself as well. So like we said, the first step is to make that decision, to say, I don't want my child to be bullied. I don't want my child to have a hard time pronouncing certain sounds. My kid is maybe 2 or 3 or 4 even, and I really want to help them get over this thumb sucking. Awesome. That's the first step, is to make the decision that you're going to help your child with this process. Because again, the longer and the older your child gets, the harder it's going to be for them to stop sucking their thumb, and the worse the problems are going to get when it comes to speech development. So make a plan, get everybody in the family on board, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, whatever the case is, set a date. This sounds very strategic and logical, and that's fine. That's what it needs to be, because they're your child, and you don't want to see them go through any suffering. You don't want to see them have a hard time, but this is going to be a hard process for them because you're taking something away that they're so accustomed to. They're so used to sucking their thumb, and it's not something you can remove from them. You can't just chop it off. It's not something you can just throw away like a pacifier. So it's going to take time, and it's going to probably see some tears and maybe some screaming and some tantrums, especially the older they are. So the better able you are to just plan it out and make it a scheduled thing, the easier it's going to be for you to step back and maybe remove some of that emotional ties as the parent. And you can say, okay, this is the plan and we're sticking to it. And by having everybody on board, grandma, grandpa, whoever it is involved in the child's life, the more likely you are to succeed, because one, the child, everybody around the child can be in support of when they're not sucking their thumb, when at times that they used to. Awesome. Everybody praises them, gives them, high fives, congratulations, good job, whatever the case is, and everybody can be on the same page. So first step, make a plan, set a date. Okay, it's going to be June 1st is when we're going to start our plan, and this is what it's going to look like. And then whatever you decide your family's going to do, stick to it. No matter how hard it gets, it will get better. They will get over it eventually, as long as you remain consistent with it. So I'm going to give you some tips on some things that you can try. Every child is a little different, so you may try some things for a little bit and realize, hey, this isn't working for my kid. That's okay. Throw it out, try something new, but just keep at it, because your child's speech will be grateful for it, your child's social life will be grateful for it, and just your relationship, that frustration that may be setting in between you and your child about, why is my child not doing this? They're 5 years old. Why are they still sucking their thumb? Or they're 6 or they're 7. Trust me, I've seen many of kids that age still sucking their thumb. They may not do it at school, but they do it at home or whatever the case is. So start with just a short goal, just a small kind of trial run goal, something where your child can feel successful about it. So you might just want to start with, okay, maybe your kiddo sucks his thumb almost all day, which some do. So you're going to say, okay, just at dinner time on the weekends, we're going to try not sucking the thumb. So again, small goal, one meal, 2 days a week. That's going to be the time where we're going to stop the thumb sucking. And again, put on the praise, get any sort of motivators, reinforcers when they're not sucking their thumb at a time when they used to. Just lay it on thick. You know how people, when they're potty training, have like potty parties? Kind of the same thing. It's a behavior pattern that you're trying to change, so you really want to reinforce and celebrate when they're doing the behavior that you want them to do. So start with something small, and then you can build up on from there. So think of the rewards and consequences that you want to have. Consequences in the sense that maybe they don't get something that they really like, but you're not necessarily punishing them or taking anything away from them. So for instance, if they have limited screen time and that's something that's highly motivating for them, you could do, okay, if they don't suck their thumb during dinner time, then they get to watch a little bit of screen time, and that could be the reward. But if they do end up sucking their thumb during dinner time, then they don't get that screen time. So again, you're not taking anything away. They just don't get the reward that they would have gotten if they had stopped sucking their thumb. So think about that. Think about what really gets your child excited, because that's going to be something really special for them and motivating for them to want to try this, because it's going to be hard, but it's worth it. Some techniques for quitting. Bedtime is going to be one of the hardest times, or nap times, because you can't monitor them the whole time. If they're younger, you can maybe go into their room and gently pull the thumb out of their mouth once they fall asleep and they're in a deep sleep, without waking them up. So again, maybe they needed to suck their thumb to initially put themselves to sleep, but then after a little bit, you can go in the room and just pull their thumb out of their mouth so it's not staying in there the whole time. For older kids, they may need a more physical reminder, such as putting something on their thumb or their hand or their arm. So they have like cutout gloves that you could use, maybe thumb covers, something that you can put over their thumb as a physical reminder for them not to suck their thumb to go to sleep. There could be, sounds a little bit more extreme, but again, we see kids who are 7, 8 years old that are still sucking their thumb, and that's when it becomes a bigger problem. But there are braces that you could put on the arm to hold their arm in place so that when they try to suck their thumb, it doesn't go through. So those are some physical reminders for the older kids who are trying to break this habit. Those are some things you could try. Other things to try on the thumb is, yucky tasting things. So people have tried all kinds of things, nail polish. They have special nail polish that tastes gross when they put their thumb in their mouth. Some people put spicy things on it. It's all up to you and how far you want to go on it, but those are just some ideas. And again, when you're coming up with this plan for the family, make sure everybody's on board. If you've got more than one child in the house, you kind of have to set the rules for everybody. So it can't just be one child gets to suck their thumb and the other doesn't, because then that seems very unfair to the kids. So you might want to take a look at, okay, it's going to be a no thumb sucking rule for all the kids in the house, or anybody that comes over to the house. So any kids that come over to the house, they also can't suck their thumb while they're in your house. And you can talk to your children, especially depending on their age, but you can talk to them about the importance of no fingers and thumbs in the mouth, and explain to them about germs and other things that you don't want to put in your mouth because they might get sick and whatnot. Another strategy you can think about doing is setting aside places in the house which are like no sucking places, or suck free, or whatever, thumb suck free, or whatever you want to call it, such as, okay, maybe they can suck their thumb when they're in their room, but they can't suck their thumb when they're in the living room or the dining room or the playroom. That's another strategy you can use as you're making a plan for your family to really cut down on this habit. And you want to be consistent. It's going to be hard, but like I said, if you think about it from the beginning, okay, what are the strategies we're going to try? What's the date? What's our goal? Do we want them to go from sucking their thumb all day to maybe half the day, and then maybe, only at a certain, only at bedtime, and then eventually quit from even the bedtime? So come up with a plan, write it out. That way, when times are getting tough and you're getting frustrated or exhausted, you can say, okay, this is the plan. This is why we're doing it. It's for our kids' good well-being in terms of speech and social behaviors. So be firm and and consistent, but not scary or angry. Like I said, you don't want to punish them by taking things away. They just may not get the reward that they would have gotten if they had stopped sucking their thumb for whatever plan you have in place. But even more important is to stay consistent even when your child starts crying, starts throwing a tantrum. I know it can be hard to watch, but maybe they can comfort themselves in some other ways, reading a book, going in a quiet corner, whatever the case is. And a couple more tips. I know these are quite a lot, but again, this book does a great job of laying it out there. So if you were like, this is a lot of great information, Jessica, but I can't remember it all, take a look at this book, and I'll put the link in the resources below. Sometimes kids who suck their thumb on a chronic basis have a favorite toy or a blanket that they hold with them while they're sucking their thumb. One strategy that Pam Marshalla talks about is to take away that object, consistently but gently. Maybe you have a big ceremony about, okay, we're going to be all done with our blankie, or whatever the case is. Put it away or put it in a box, or whatever you want to do, because then they're not associating that object with the habit of thumb sucking. And if it doesn't ruin their progress or make them, regress, maybe they'll see it every once in a while. So maybe it's a weekend toy, or only on special occasions toys or blankets. The blanket come out, when grandparents are over. As long as it doesn't automatically make them suck their thumb again, then that should be fine. It's not something you have to throw away or burn or whatever the case is. You can keep it if it's really important to them, but maybe reserving it for only special times. And then you want to build up their tolerance. So like we talked about earlier, you want to think of specific times. These are especially for kids who have that increased duration. So they're sucking their thumb for a long time throughout the day, or frequently throughout the day. Set aside time. So start small, maybe with 1 meal a day. And then you may move to 2 meals a day, and then 3 meals a day. And then maybe it's, half of the day, and then the full day. But start small and build up from there so they can increase and build up their tolerance for not having their thumb for longer periods of time. 1, your child will feel successful. 2, you will feel successful. And 3, it's not like quitting cold turkey. It's a gradual buildup. And another last strategy that you can use is to think about superheroes. Those are really popular these days. If your child has a favorite superhero, you can take the attention off of you and your child, meaning, telling your child, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing that. We're not doing that right now. But to put it on the superhero. So, I never see Spider-Man sucking his thumb. So anytime your child is wearing the Spider-Man shirt or eating Spider-Man cereal or playing with his Spider-Man toy, you can say, wow, look at Spider-Man. He's doing such a great job. He's not sucking his thumb. That way, again, you're shifting the attention off of just you and your child directly reprimanding or correcting your child and moving it on to the superhero. So that's another strategy that you can try out. And lastly, just be sure that you're communicating with your child. No matter how old they are, if they're 7 years old or if they're 4 years old, they want to know and talk with you about it. So maintain an environment where they can feel comfortable telling you, hey, mommy, this is really hard. I really like sucking my thumb. Can I just do it this one last time? And just meet them where they are, comfort them, reassure them, explain to them why it's important for them to continue to try to stop sucking their thumb. Praise them and acknowledge them a ton for their efforts. Even if they're having a hard time with it. Wow, I really loved how you tried to stop sucking your thumb at dinner tonight. I could tell that it was hard, but you stuck with it, and I'm so proud of you. Giving them those words of affirmation can be so encouraging, especially as it becomes difficult for them to continue this pattern, but it will get easier over time. And be sure to tell them, keep those boundaries that you set out, those guidelines, but show them that you care and that it is serious and it is important for them to stop. And then show them respect when they do something that a lot of even adults can't do, which is quitting and changing a habit. Think of all the adults that have tried to stop, to quit smoking or to stop drinking, how hard it is for them. It's not exactly the same thing, but for a 4-year-old, it could feel like that. So really just acknowledging them, praising them, reminding them of how much you love them and are supporting them and are in their corner will go such a long way for your relationship. So at the end of all this, they remember that you still love and care for them. So hope that was helpful. I'll drop the resource that we used for most of the information, which again is Pam Marshall's book, How to Stop Thumb Sucking, some practical ideas for any parent or caregiver to pick up and use. You don't need a professional to implement these things. You may have to see a speech therapist, again, if your child is older and their speech sounds are already affected, but for the most part, there are things that you can carry out at home. So I will see you guys next week. We're back on Thursday because we'll be out of town and traveling at the beginning part of the week, but I will see you next week for another fun conversation about communication. Take care.